It's great to be here, and welcome everybody. Great to see many people tuned in. So before we get started, let me just start by saying a word of thanks to Eugene. You may not notice because you only hear him at the beginning of these webinars, at the end, but there is actually a lot of work that goes into planning these events. So Eugene has taken up this task, and it's really great to see this lead to this series of webinars. So many thanks, Eugene. Great work. And yeah, let's get going. This presentation will be about the multiplicity system. I'm going to work on the walking you through what this is. It's an introduction, so I'm not assuming anybody knows what this system is. And before we do so, I'd like to note that this is a system developed by Metabolism of Cities, an organization already mentioned by Eugene. So let's start discussing that for a moment. So Metabolism of Cities is an initiative that has started out in 2014, and it is something that very much started as a collective of people working together remotely on and around the topic of urban metabolism. So we very much started out as a group of, at that point, students who did research on urban metabolism, and we all felt this was a very interesting field, but we worked in our own little bubble and felt it was useful to start collaborating, and we did so primarily through the setup of an online open source platform in which we would share information, data, literature, etc. And this simply grew over time, and at this point the group has grown. We are now 11 people as official members of the organization, and it's, as you can see here, it's a wide variety of people from a number of different places. And what we all have in common is that we are intrigued by the concept of urban metabolism, and we feel this tool set has, and this field has, a lot of potential, and we'd like to bring this to the front. And what we all feel is, for long times, this has been a tool that has been developed by academics and spread mostly through academic circles, but it's something that could really help city planning and environmental monitoring, and we hope it can make a difference in the actual resource consumption and impact within cities. But to actually make that happen, it requires that academics go out and somehow make this connection with the practical field. And it's something that we all try to do in different ways and forms, and mostly through and around this website that we run, metabolismofcities.org. So we have as our goal as an organization to collaborate on systematically improving the sustainability of cities by creating and sharing urban metabolism knowledge and accelerating its implementation in policy and practice. So that's what we are about, and we do that through a number of different activities, and you can see them here. So this is creating knowledge, sharing knowledge, applying knowledge, and fostering a community. And if you visit the website, you will see that we have a large body of information on there. There is a section on literature, that's how we got started, but there's also data, there are videos, there is an online course. There's a lot of information out there, and we also run a number of projects that actually work on implementation of urban metabolism practices. So, and all of that we do by trying to foster a community. So you can see from the structure of our organization being a group of people that collaborate remotely. We really try to bring people together around this topic in different ways and forms. So that could be locally underground in a city, but that could also be by just collaborating remotely like we do and working on projects together. So something that shows what the current project is all about is exemplified through this pyramid developed by MinFuture, the MinFuture project, and this shows what is necessary for strategies to be developed and implemented around sustainable resource management. And in this pyramid, you can see that the idea is that you've got at the bottom systems in place in cities, and that these systems provide data. So data on resource consumption or extraction or waste, or other ways in which resources are processed or used. And data provide the pillar for models and scenarios, and you need to factor into that the uncertainty that comes with data. That will then build onto your options to create visualizations and indicators, and that allow people to develop support for strategy and decision making. So you can see this all, it's a pyramid, one block builds onto the other. And at Metabolism of Cities, with the Multiplicity project, we basically sit in the middle of this pyramid. So we see ourselves as helping bridge this big gap between the systems that are there and actual strategy and decision support. And that very much starts with management and accessibility of data, and then doing things with data. So a lot of us, we have experience in doing research on urban metabolism, and we've seen the difficulties that exist around a number of things in terms of data and obtaining it and using it. And a number of these key challenges include that it's incredibly time consuming to gather information. It's very scattered, so you will not find a single source that has information on all the inputs into a city, on what's being produced, what's being processed, what's being consumed, waste that's being generated. It often sits in very many different places on different levels. So it could be national government, could be local government, could be university level, or organizations that have this kind of information. So that makes it an incredibly time-consuming task, and difficult to also replicate, and it's something that the difficulty in accessing it also makes it very difficult to do. So that means you may be able to download information from a website, but if you do, you could encounter PDF files that you then have to put back into some machine readable format. It could be that you actually have to request data in person or through letters, through emails. So it's again quite a difficult process. And finally, this format that you get it in may not be in the format that we as researchers need. So we like information on physical flows, right? So that's quantities, and it may very well be in, let's say, in terms of food. You can see the total surface size that's planted within a city of a particular crop, and then you need to figure out how to convert that into what's being grown in that city. So those are a couple of the challenges that we've encountered, and all these challenges make that first block of the pyramid, the data block, incredibly weak, because maybe you are able to develop an MFA on a city, but it means that you had to go out and get the data that it was required. It took a lot of time, and it is difficult to replicate this, and it's something that therefore makes that first bottom block a incidental data set that's just there because someone collected it. It's not consistently available, and for others it's not easy to access this kind of information, and they all have to go through the same process. So if we want to reach that level of actual strategy and decision support, we need to start by strengthening that data component, and then we can look into the other components around visualizations and tools, etc. But what we figured within our group was that it's very much worthwhile to look into how we can help strengthen that data layer of the pyramid. And we had some experience from a number of different cities doing this work ourselves, that we thought, let's try and make something that we could envision would work for a number of different cities, and that would make this kind of work easier, and it would strengthen this first part of things. So we call this project that we set up the Multiplicity project. And a couple of key components that we defined for this data work to be easier are listed here. So you can see, first of all, we envision this as an online platform that provides data on urban metabolism within a city. And that means having a single centralized platform that people can go to access this. So instead of it being all scattered and all over the place, we figured, well, what if we provide this kind of platform and people can provide information and we provide the general public with ways to access this in one single location. So that means it needs to be a very user-friendly interface, no more downloading of PDF files and sifting through reports, but easy to browse and navigate and download interfaces. So that's the first characteristic. Secondly, we very much embrace the philosophy around open source and open access. Our whole website is an open source website. The source code is available, and any information that we produce is similarly licensed as open source or open access, and we feel the same should apply to this platform. Thirdly, we need to make sure that there is some academic rigor, some scientific rigor behind this system. So we can't just upload some data and accept any kind of number in here. We need to know where it came from. We need to know what kind of uncertainty goes with it. We need to know how you can replicate it. So that's key for us in the academic field to be able to use this. And in general, we feel like it's important that when this kind of information becomes more readily available, that we also show that it's really important that you understand that there is barely such a thing as fully reliable 100% coverage in this field, and it's fine. This is how it works, but we must show that. Now, this is very much a community-driven project, so also very important that people are able to contribute data to this. Any person who sits on a data set should be able to put this in, and the whole system should be replicable and scalable. So I'm going to jump through a couple slides here to show you what this has led to. And the first thing, well, actually not the first thing, something that we developed as we went along, was a roadmap to split this project up in a number of different phases. The first one being around collecting data and uploading it. We call it the data warehouse phase. Then we need to figure out how can we balance things and think around doing an MFA. You need to be able to balance all your inputs and your outputs. We don't see that as the first step because we feel it's very helpful to be able to allow bits and pieces of data. And even if you don't have an economy-wide set of data, you should be able to upload these pieces. And later, we look into how to balance that. And finally, you can do all kinds of interesting analyses and develop tools once you have all this data in place. So our work to date has started with the development of a proper database system that allows for the recording of this kind of information, and have worked together with Rupert Meers and his team. He is one of our members, and he started at Yale with the Yale Stocks and Flows database system. And we've continued this work with him to now develop the Stocks and Flows database system. That's really a database system catered to stocks and flows information. And this is a really useful starting component because a normal database isn't fully aware and understanding of how to deal with flows and circularity and the fact that flows can turn into stocks and they can then turn into flows. So all these intricacies are taken care of by this database structure. It's easy to record information and we can do all kinds of tricks that I'll show later. So that was the first step. Then we started working on developing an interface to put information in this system. And again, this needed to be a user-friendly interface. So we created a web interface that allows people, the general public, to upload information. And we don't just talk about data on stocks and flows. We also feel that it's important to include a lot of other information that's related to all of this work. So you can see here a number of different sections. And for any of these sections, we developed an interface that allows someone without any advanced computer knowledge to upload data into a section. So I'll show you here. Let's say we would like to upload information on the material flows, or in this case, electricity consumption. What you do is you go through a wizard in which you're instructed to format your data in a particular format. So basically, you put it in a spreadsheet in a particular column order, then you copy that into a big box over here. Then the system will validate your information. You make sure to use the right linkages to either a city as a whole or a suburb or any kind of unit that you have data on. Next, you provide some metadata. So you need to tell the system information about the reliability, as I mentioned before, how to replicate it, and where your information comes from. And that's it. That's all that a user does to upload information to the system. So once this is in the system, the database stores it, and we can then do a lot of tricks with it. And I'll show you just now. But this doesn't apply just to flows and stocks, as I said, but we also allow people to upload data on what infrastructure exists in the city. We have shapefiles that you can upload to create maps, to show the boundaries of your city, photos, videos, spaces for data on sectors. So there's a lot of information that goes in here with the idea of really building a detailed picture of what things look like in the city. So the data uploading system was next. And then we worked on an outreach and collaboration program in which we went out to places, we presented our system, we developed a series of instruction videos to show people what things, how they can upload information to it. And I guess this is part of our outreach project. And this is really to get people excited and working with us to put information in the system. So this is all ongoing work, and what it all has led to is a series of initial prototype city dashboards. So you can see here we've developed a number of, we call them city dashboards. So they are sub-pages within our website that are dedicated to providing insight into what's happening in this city. And as you saw before, it includes a lot of information, and we try to make this readily available to people. Could be academics, could be city officials, could be the general public. So the attempt is really to make it attractive, easy to navigate and to understand, but still have that that rigor. So you can always go back to the source and really see where things come from. So we started with a number of prototype cities, and we're now very much in the process of adding information and expanding this set of cities. So this is the work to date, and I'll show you now a bit how these dashboards, what they look like. And what we've done to make it as accessible as possible is we've developed this sector-based approach in which the core components of the city dashboards are the sector overviews, if you will, and you can browse each city by paging through these sectors, and you see a very big screenshot over here. So this is one sector, and it's split up in different sections. So you can see here the general information, data sets, infrastructure, documents, and multimedia for any sector, including agriculture, construction, energy, water, waste, whatever we can find information on. So to start with the general information, this is something that provides someone a quick glance at what's happening in this city. How does, for instance, the water sector operate from a metabolic point of view? And people can click on any of these things and read a little bit, and you can see this as a primer into this sector in this city. Now, the next bit is around data sets, and this is where we saw before when people upload data into the system, it can be shown in easy to browse ways. So any data set uploaded, the system will automatically generate a number of graphs. So here you can see something around dam capacity in the city of Cape Town, and this is one data set. And at the same time, the system will generate from this particular data set an option to visualize it on the left, but you can also click one of the buttons and it will create another graph, which is the one here on the right. So yeah, that really allows for a nice way to visualize what's happening. And another way to show this is if you have more specific data on particular areas within a city, you can see these kinds of maps that show within a city how something is differentiated within suburbs or areas. Now the next part is around infrastructure, and that's where we show what's happening. Here we can see in terms of the, in this case, water infrastructure in the city. So people can upload data on water treatment plants, wastewater treatment works, etc. And the system will generate these profiles for each of these places, automatically create based on the GPS coordinates maps and satellite imagery. And then we can pull out of that bigger data set whatever is linked to this particular piece of infrastructure to show the same data set, but now filter down to this particular place. Now, then we have two other sections around documents and multimedia. And again, that's showing for this particular sector what are the relevant documents that people can see, and providing all different kinds of imagery around what's happening here in the city. So that's a bit of an overview of how things currently work. Now we have also a number of different activities that we're working on at the moment. So in phase one, this data warehouse phase, we're also working, of course, on adding more data, constantly looking for collaborators on this. We're also improving our visualizations. We're making more options to download and search. And we are constantly adding more prototype cities. We have a number of cities in nearly all continents that we are working on with collaborators. And our goal is to create one complete city, so we can really show all sectors with a wide variety of data in there. Ideally, what we have is an army of people working on here. Let us know if you have that available. But we're getting there step by step, adding information where we can. And then in phase two, we are already starting to work on something like a Sankey diagram builder using some nice software that's out there and mass balancing tools. And for the third phase, we're working on a European Union project that looks specifically on organic waste and construction and demolition waste, for which we will in early 2020 be developing a number of tools. So it's a parallel project that we're working on different components. And what we most importantly like to ask from people here in this call is to collaborate. We are open to people joining us in any way they see fit. So if you would like to contribute data, you've seen you can do that. If you'd like to join activities to provide data in other cities, if you have a research group and you'd like to collaborate for getting your city on the map, start a whole new portal, work with students and get them to do some research that leads into some more data into it. There's a lot that's possible. So we really like to invite the community to do things with us here. And if you're interested, please do get in touch. And yeah, that's a bit of an introduction. And I think this is a good time to close this part. And if there are any questions, yeah, I am happy to answer those. And I see Eugene is typing a chat saying that anybody who has any question can type that in the chat to Eugene, and he will then moderate the Q&A. So I think, Eugene, I'll just hand over at this point to you.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Paul. That was a fantastic presentation. We already have a few questions. So I'll start us off with a question from Lisa. Lisa was wondering, I'll just read the question directly to you. She was wondering if how the data quality indicators are being scored. You mentioned that you're in one of the slides you're characterizing the data with, I think there was 3 or 4 dimensions. And just to clarify where subjectivity comes into there, is there subjectivity on the side of the contributor to score data, or is there some clearly defined parameters in which they're coming up with these scores? Can you speak to that a bit?
Sure. Thank you so much, Eugene and Lisa, for this question. So what we've done is we have used data quality indicators that come from the LCA literature. So it's based on the pedigree matrix, and that provides a 1 through 5 ranking of a number of different components. And we've adjusted it slightly. So we have used, I think, 3 or 4 of their data quality indicators, and we've added 1 or 2 other ones. And because this comes from a quite well-established methodology, each of these rankings, so a score of 1 or 2 or 3, has a very well-defined definition of when should you rank it as such. And for the ones that we developed, we tried to also define it as clearly as we could. And that's not to say that there is no subjectivity. So we think it's pretty reasonably defined, but as you may know, it could get difficult, and you could also have people who are just not familiar enough with these kind of methodologies. So that's also why we have some data curation and a system in place in which people check data that's uploaded by our volunteers. And we also invite people to become data curators and to help doing that. So I don't think it's perfect yet, and we're open to suggestions, but we do think there is a system in place that has some good foundations.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. We have another question here from Anna Petitbois, and Anna was wondering, since this type of analysis is used for decision making, she's also wondering if it's also possible to report data on existing urban policies or citizen-led initiatives that might help understand certain resource flows, and that would be particularly helpful from our perspective.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the idea is to see if the policies could feed back into the system, or that allow you to understand where things come from.
Yes.
Okay. So I must say this is something that we think is definitely possible, but it's a very clear example of what we would consider phase 3 activities, when we develop tools that do something with the data that we have. So we hopefully look into this early 2020, at least for a couple of sectors. And our idea is that you can, for instance, let's say you have a number of years with data on a particular flow, and you have a moment in which a new policy was introduced. Then you can start unpacking the data, and you can run some analysis to see, well, what changes did we see, and can we correlate that? And that's the kind of thing that we would love to do. We're not there yet, but we do, we put the data system in place, and in that phase 3, we'll start looking at how we can correlate those.
Okay, and as very appreciative. Thank you for that. And we have another question from Alexander Pereira Santos, who worked on the Brussels Circular Economy Plan. In that case, one of the greatest challenges was to make all the data compatible. And considering that, what kind of data would you need, and which are some of the usual sources for these data, and how can they contribute to the data curation? If you can expand a little bit on that too. And for compatibility, he means in terms of spatial and time scale, as an example.
Yeah, great question. So this is very much a big challenge, but something that we have, in a way, tried to sidestep in the first phase by simply focusing on the broader data collection. And what we've done in this first phase is we said, listen, we are currently open to any data that has to do with material stocks or flows. So currently, you can upload data in many different shapes and forms, and that means in terms of time and space, it's very variable. You could upload a 5-year long data set. You could upload a weekly reported data set that only covers a couple months. You could, in terms of space, upload a data set that covers the whole city. You could upload something that covers a neighborhood, a suburb, or even a single company. And we did it intentionally because we said, listen, some of the challenges that we've seen as well as researchers is that you have this mismatch indeed between how we would like to report and the format data comes in. But it's still very helpful to have this more fine-grained data, or very specifically for very small time scales available data. So we currently accept all of this information, and because the database structure is quite well set up, it basically allows us, in what is phase 2, it will allow us to put these things together. And because right now we're only focused on just putting data in the system, we haven't developed the tools, but the system is in place to basically say, okay, I now have data, from anywhere from a week-long data to 5-year data, and for a couple suburbs as well for the whole city or the whole province. Now I want to do something with it. And what we can build relatively easily is a system that allows a user to do sort of a place in my basket kind of thing, in which they can add parameters and they can say, I want these data sets to be added, and the system can then aggregate or disaggregate as you wish, noting that there could be gaps. So as long as the system knows, listen, you only cover a couple months in the year or 1 year out of your 10, or you're only covering technically half of the city or 60% of the population, then you can still put together a mass balance. So the idea is that a user can simply put things together as they see fit, and the system can indicate what's there and what's missing. So this way, we really hope that we can allow a new level of analysis, and even though it's not perfect and complete, you can do more with this a higher level of nuanced data. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. And in terms of how to contribute, we are currently developing a master list that includes a ton of different types of data sets that we have seen from our own work of uploading data that could exist for cities. And we plan to soon make this available. And people can then simply peruse that list and see, listen, I've got this, or I know where to find this. And anybody who can upload, even if it's just one data set, is very welcome to do so. And this also reminds me that we are very happy to host a sort of workshop. Eugene may elaborate later, but there could be an option to host workshops through the ISIE, and we would be very happy to do so, in which we can assist people in the uploading process, and they can kickstart their own data portal or help add data to existing portals. And we can then do some handholding and showcasing of how that works. So if there's any interest, we'd love to hear about that.
Great, thanks, Paul. And Alexander affirms he got what he was looking for from that. Another question we have from Ben Cartwright. Ben's wondering, does the data have to be on stocks and flows that are already in existence, or can be based on future plans? So he's specifically thinking to do with planning applications where construction and demolition will relate to future stocks and flows.
Oh, that's very interesting. So we have one example in which we have put in the system some future projections of population, actually. and technically in our system, the population of a city is a stock, and the type of material is human. We figured that would make sense from our perspective. And we had some cities that had forecasts for that, and we simply uploaded them as it was dated in the future, and we made a note of this is a future flow. And the only thing that we must do to cater to this in a more varied way for all these kinds of planning purposes is to have a better flag that really shows this is modeled or somehow forecasted, and that should then allow for uploading of these kind of future flows. It's just a matter of stating that your year is in the future and that this is not an exact kind of a number, but nothing should prevent us from doing that. So absolutely. And again, the actual application of this in then tools that do so would be a phase 3 application, but already data can be uploaded in this way. Yeah.
Okay. And just one final question for me. So you mentioned in your characterization of data geographical correlation. What does that data characteristic speak to? Could you explain that a little bit further?
What do you mean exactly, Eugene? What it speaks to?
So when you say geographical correlation, what does that exactly mean? It wasn't immediately obvious to me.
Okay, sure. So basically, we try to link all information that we upload to something that we call a reference space. And this is again part of this StaffDB database structure. So anytime you upload any piece of information, you'll have to tell the system what is your reference space, what is this linked to. And that could be a city, that could be a suburb, that could be a company. but that needs to have some geographical presence, right? So if ideally you upload the boundaries of that system, and you can upload shapefiles of your suburb or of your city. And you must also remember that cities, they can actually change in shape. Different organizations could report on different scales, or over time, the boundaries of a city, they may change. So for us, it's very important to make that correlation between the data and the actual system that it pertains to. And by having people upload these, the geospatial reference for their data, we can later create all kinds of maps. And you've seen an example in which you can show, okay, well, if I have data on a micro-territorial unit, and that could be a suburb, for instance, then I can automatically generate this kind of map that shows the intensity within different suburbs, and I can start doing a geospatial analysis and seeing, if you define your urban center, how do things differ between your urban center and your periphery, for instance. So there's basically a geospatial element to all our data, because everything is referenced to a physical space that has boundaries set in the system by the user. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Very interesting. And I want to thank you again, Paul, for your great presentation, and thank all of you who are joining in today on today's webinar. Lots of really great questions. And we would love to hear your feedback on today's webinar. You'll be getting a survey to your email shortly, just asking a few questions about your thoughts on the topic, and as well the general structure of the webinar. If you'd like to find out more about ISAE or the Sustainable Urban Systems section, please visit our webpage at is4ie.org. That's with the number 4. We're also starting up digital workshops similar to what Paul was referring to for the Multiplicity website. And those will be starting in the coming months. And if you have some new process or idea or method that you would like to share with the ISIE community in more of a hands-on manner, because the platform we have available to us allows collaboration and breakout groups, we can do so. We can help you promote your work and your ideas. So please do get in touch if you'd like to do that. Further, we're currently filling up our webinar schedule for the coming year. And if you would like to have your work showcased, if you'd like to present, please do let me know. And otherwise, thanks to you all again for attending, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next Sustainable Urban Systems webinar.